Hi, everybody. I am so excited that you are here tonight to talk about achieving your goals in 2020. I am Kimberly Banks Fawcett from Note Investing Academy. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting in general, as well as a little tidbit I came across in 2019 that I think is going to take my goal setting for 2020 and kick them up a notch. I hope it'll be helpful to you too. All right, you ready? Let's get started. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about annual planning, and then we're going to cover why traditional goal setting really doesn't work, despite what all the experts say. Then we're going to talk about a better approach. And finally, we're going to wrap up with how you can incorporate this approach into your note space in 2020, whether you want to start, change, or grow your business. You ready? All right, annual planning always starts out with your end goal. What do you want to accomplish in 2020? I think most people agree that that's the best place to start. There's always an exception though. But what people often overlook is the fact that to really be happy, you've got to work on your professional self and your personal self. If one is working and one is not, the one that's not is going to bleed into the one that you're enjoying, and it's going to cause you some strife during the year. We've all had a job that we either hated or just really, really, really dreaded going to. How were your Sunday nights when you were working there? You can have this fantastic weekend, have a ton of fun with your friends and family, but by Sunday night, most Sunday nights, you're sullen, maybe a little cranky, a little withdrawn, because, tomorrow I got to go to work. On the flip side, we've all had relationships that either were ending or we were having a little strife. And although we are having a fantastic day at work, everything is firing, we're getting things done, our boss thinks we are the smartest person on the planet, or our investors think that we are the best known investors on this planet. And then all of a sudden you see this person's name, whether it's a text or in your caller ID or it's in your inbox. There's this person's name, and it just sort of stops you in your tracks. Now, it's probably not going to ruin your whole day. Probably depends on the situation. But it is going to make you stop. And then it takes a while to get that momentum going again. It has bled into your really successful work day because you haven't worked on that side. So remember that you can keep one side separate from the other for short periods of time. But if you really want to improve your life in 2020, you're going to have to work on both. And you are absolutely worth the time and effort. Okay, so whenever the topic of goal setting comes up, we always hear this quote: "A goal without a plan is just a wish." It's been attributed to a French journalist and poet whose name is in the right side of the slide, and I'm not going to butcher it for him. But there's always been a little controversy over whether he said it or he stole it. Regardless of who came up with it, we all know it's true. Just having a goal in your head or even just putting it on paper is not going to get you success. Daydreams on their own seldom produce results. You have to move beyond wishful thinking to produce tangible results. The dreamer has to do something. And for this reason, I think we should really change the conversation a bit. I don't think we should talk about goal setting because that only addresses part of the process. I think we should be talking about goal achieving. That's really what we want, right? Okay. Next, when we're discussing goal setting, we hear what gets measured gets managed. Put simply, you take care of the things you're focused on. You can have this tremendously long list of very well thought out, gee, wouldn't it be great to have this type ideas, but if no one's working on them, they're not getting done. This quote is attributed to Peter Drucker, an Austrian-born American business consultant who Business Week called the man who invented management. But because everything comes with controversy. This quote does too. I have to confess, this controversy amused me because he never actually said it. He was misquoted, shockingly. No one ever gets misquoted in media. In 1954, his book, The Practice of Management, he was discussing the difference between what he referred to as knowledge versus manual work. Today, we'd probably be discussing management and labor. And what he actually said was, working on the right things is what makes knowledge work effective. This is not capable of being measured by any of the yardsticks for manual work. One cannot tell a knowledge worker in a few simple words whether he is doing the right job and how well he is doing it. So he wasn't talking about goal setting at all. He was pointing out that all goals are not created equally. That means the way you approach and evaluate a goal has to be tailored to the goal itself. You can't use the same rubric for strategic planning that you would use for widget production. So now let's get into more of the specifics of modern goal setting theory. We've probably all seen these books and a host more on the shelves of our local Barnes & Noble, and almost all of them really center around the idea of SMART goals. The concept of SMART goals has been attributed to Peter Drucker as well, but it was really written by the Director of Corporate Planning for the Washington Water and Power Company. George Duran was the first person to actually come up with the idea and put it in writing and discuss it in a document. But Mr. Drucker got credit for that. I wonder if he was generally misquoted or I just happened to find the two spots where he was. But let's go over the general definition of SMART goals. I'm sure we've all heard it, but we want to make sure we're on the same page. So SMART goals is obviously an acronym. The S stands for specific. What exactly do you want to accomplish? Specific goals are more likely to be achieved than general goals. Saying something like, I want to close more deals, won't cut it. But if you specifically say, I want to close 25 deals in 2020, that's going to be a useful goal. Next, SMART goals are measurable. What are your criteria to measure your progress and success? If you can't measure it, you have no idea if you've accomplished it. Using our note goal, counting how many closings you had in 2020 would be pretty easy. All right, on to A. SMART goals are attainable. Some models say achievable. Same difference though. Do your goals fit in realistically with your skills? Even with goals that stretch us a bit out of our comfort zone, which of course are always the goals that are really recommended, are they actually doable? Striving for something like 25 deals in 2020 is doable for most note investors. Trying to close on 1,000 deals in 2020, that's going to be a bit of a stretch, I would say, for most note investors. Make sure the goal that you're actually setting is something you can attain. The next one, the R, relevant. Are you able to do something that achieves your goals? If the goal that you've picked is really outside of your control, it's not a great goal and you might want to rethink it. You're only able to change yourself and your actions. Your goals shouldn't be something that your neighbor has to accomplish. And the last one, the T, SMART goals are timely. Some also say time-based. Can you complete your goal in a reasonable amount of time? A 1-year goal is a reasonable amount of time. 10-year plans are a little less motivating than 1-year goals. How do you know that you're being successful? How do you know that you're moving in the right direction? So 10-year goals definitely have value in having a broader picture of what you want to do, but you do need to break it up into specific milestones, smaller things to manage, and That's why it's usually a year long. So overall, the concept of SMART goals really does help us improve the goals we set. We come up with things we can actually work on, actually make some progress on. But most of these books, most of these authors stop right here. Once our goals are, good goals, we're done. The problem is, if you do stop here, you're still dealing with wishes. You've got specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely wishes, but still just wishes. So now we have to figure out how to move from SMART wishes to well-planned and executable goals. If we take our goal of 25 deals in 2020, we'll obviously know on January 1st, 2021, whether or not we accomplished our goal. But by 2021, we've missed our opportunity to adjust in 2020 to achieve that goal. To make sure we're on target and to make sure we stay on target, we need to take our annual goal and break it into some smaller, less intimidating chunks, or mini goals, if you want to put it that way. One way to do it would be to take your 25 deals in 2020 and think of it as 2 deals per month plus an extra one sometime during that year. That would be extremely easy to track and pretty easy to do as well. All right, so you're going along, and what happens if you don't buy anything in January? You just started working on this goal and you already have not fulfilled what you promised yourself you would. What happens? Are you sunk for the rest of the year? Is 2020 just a write-off? Well, no, not even close. If you fall behind one month, just buy more the next month. You didn't buy your 2 in January, so buy 4 in February. Or maybe you buy 3 in February, 3 in March, 3 in April, and now you have made up for the 2 you missed in January, and you can cross that one extra one off your list for the rest of the year. Not a big deal. What if the opposite happens, though? Let's say you're chugging along. You've done your 2 deals in January. You've done your 2 deals in February. Got your 2 deals done in March. And in April, you find a really nice pool of 19 loans. When you close on those, you have made your 25 goals, 25 loans for the year. You've made your goal. What do you do now? Well, you have 2 options. You can increase your annual goal. So maybe now you want to get 32 or maybe even 40 deals in 2020. Or you can check this off your list and move on to other goals. It could be a note-related goal, like improving your workout process so you move through things faster and more profitably. It could be a running a marathon goal. It could either be professional or personal, notes related, or in other investments, doesn't matter. It's just up to you. You now have some free time you can do something with. All right. The final piece in the puzzle of moving from wishes to goals are your action plans. An action plan, I like this analogy I came up with. An action plan is to a goal what a recipe is to a batch of cookies. It's the roadmap that gets you from one place to another with all of the steps you need to take along the way to end up where you want to be when you're done. Unfortunately, not as many of the authors and experts address this part of goal setting. As we said before, they often just stop as soon as they address SMART goals. And others, the few that do talk about it, they only focus on the passage of time, like we did in the last slide with 2 deals per month. That's pretty limiting. An action plan to be really successful has to be a little more flexible than that, or a little more well thought out. It is still important because consistency is a key element of success and the ability to achieve your goals. And you are less likely to get intimidated or overwhelmed if you look at the month-size mini target than to look at the entire year's workload. But it's really an unhelpful place to stop the discussion. So to continue my cookie analogy that I like so much, it's as if the baker finished his grocery shopping and announced that cookies were complete. Wouldn't that be a terrible disappointment for all involved? So how do you create a successful, useful action plan? Well, you got to learn the steps. You need to find out who does what you want to do and how they do it. Next, you've got to develop your own model for how you want to do it. Your style and your strategy is bound to differ from other people because you have different goals and different strengths. You also enjoy these tasks and hate those tasks, and the other node investor might be a complete opposite. It's not just the steps that are important, it's how you want to do the steps. And lastly, and most importantly, you have to do it. You have to take action, or you have just wasted a ton of time, both yours and all the people you consulted along the way to find out how they do what it is you want to do. So basically, action plans are both that simple and that difficult. As you're going along, especially when you're designing an action plan for something you've never done before, it's really hard to anticipate your 6th and 7th and 8th and 103rd step when you're talking about a process you've never actually been part of. But you can fairly easily come up with steps 1 through 5. So start there. Don't let yourself be intimidated. Get started. Then by the time you figure out step 5, step 6 doesn't seem like quite as much of a jump. Once you've accomplished those, maybe 7 doesn't feel like such a jump. They're not quite as theoretical at that point because you've got experience with the previous steps. So your action plan is not carved in stone from the beginning. If you need to move it along and massage it a bit to complete it, that's okay. Just make sure you document all the steps you take and the results you got from those individual steps. Because next year, when you decide you want to move from 25 deals to 100 deals in 2021, you'll already have a roadmap and you'll be able to tweak it and improve it and make it even better for you the second time around. All right. So now let's take a look at the magic formula for achieving all of our goals. And yes, you do sense sarcasm. So first, we set our SMART goals. Next, we create our action plans. Then we work our action plans. And then we enjoy success. Right? Pretty easy. If we just all followed the damn formula, we'd all be successful and we could stop talking about this each year. Right? Not quite. We're missing something, and it's something that's important. It's something right here in between steps 2 and 3. It's the final piece of the puzzle that takes all of these actions you've outlined on paper and gets you up off your couch and doing them. Technically, it's probably the bridge in between all 4 of these steps, but I think it hits home best in between 2 and 3. So I'm going to call it 2A. So what is it? Is it discipline? Well, discipline is definitely necessary. Is it willpower? Willpower kind of sounds like it's really part of losing weight or quitting smoking, but staying away from cute kitty videos or your fantasy football standings when you really need to meet a deadline does require willpower, so it's important. Is it commitment? Absolutely a key element, but still only part of it. What about desire? Desire does explain why a lesser team can beat the best team in the league. They just wanted it more, plain and simple. So it's obviously important. But it's none of these things and all of these things and a few more. And you wrap them all up in a nice, neat package called motivation. If you aren't motivated to follow your action steps to achieve your SMART goal, it is not going to happen. And once you've found your motivation, you can't just check it off. Found that, took care of it, and move on. You got to stay motivated from the start of your action plan to the end, or again, no success. We could probably argue about the most important part of the goal achievement process for a while, but I think it's motivation. People have absolutely, unexpectedly been successful without a plan. Of course, they always pretend they were doing it this way all along and they knew what was coming, so we can't really call them on it. But we know what happens. And then there are others that are successful following an absolutely ass-backwards plan. So if it's not having goals and if it's not having a plan, it's got to be motivation. It's the most important. No one has ever been successful without it. Even if you define success as getting chosen to be the new face of L'Oreal or the brand new Gerber baby, you or your mother had to have left the house, had to have had the motivation to go out in public for you to get noticed and be chosen. Motivation ebbs and flows in even the most determined people. For short periods of time, you can talk yourself into being motivated, but we really aren't built to just conjure up motivation because we want to. And when that fails, that's when all that negative talk comes in. If you were just stronger, if you had more willpower, if you weren't so lazy, on and on. We beat ourselves up for the rest of the year for not achieving our goals and then expect things to be different, setting new goals when the ball drops. To demonstrate the impact of motivation on goal achievement, let's look at some New Year's resolutions. Granted, we're talking about the general population, not a group of hardworking, super motivated note investors, but it still makes the point. 8% of Americans achieve their New Year's resolutions. 80% of Americans fail to achieve their New Year's resolutions. Now, if you're doing the math, that means that 12% don't even bother to try to plan anything for the next year. They're just going to go in blindly and wait and see what happens. What's more, studies have actually been able to pinpoint when it all falls apart. January 12th is doomsday. On that day, the average goal setter's motivation to achieve a goal has dropped so low that it cannot and does not rebound for the rest of the year. Sure, taking a break from time to time is healthy. You don't have to work 24/7, 365 to be successful. But you've got to keep those motivation fires going throughout the year or your results are going to be disappointing. So how do we do it? How do we motivate ourselves? How do we get ourselves to make and work on our goals? And once we do that, how do we get ourselves to stay motivated so we can actually enjoy some success? I think I found the key. It is in the best book I read in 2019. The best book that I read in 2019 was Atomic Habits by James Clear. While this is his first book, he's worked for Time Magazine and the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, getting enough recognition so that he's been labeled one of the world's leading experts on habit formation. So he's not a new writer by any stretch of the imagination, even if we haven't seen him on bookshelves before. So most people that review Atomic Habits focus on like a top 10 list of all of the ideas that he raised in the book, all of which are very good ideas in my opinion. But I think the most important point of this book, and obviously the point that is most relevant to this presentation, can be summed up in 2 sentences. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Goals are the results you want to achieve. obviously. Systems are talking about the processes that lead to these results, the results you want to see. And systems are made up of tiny, atomic sized, if you will, habits all strung together. On a side note, some might call those action plans, but let's stay focused on what he said, shall we? And if you focus on this system, the goal will take care of itself. Now, why should we focus on systems? Why should we change the whole process and stop focusing on goals? Well, first, winners and losers actually have the same goals. Every Olympian wants to win a gold medal. Every entrepreneur wants to be successful. So it has to be the systems of the winners that get them better results, not the goals themselves. In addition, achieving a goal is only a momentary change. If your goal is to clean up your office, you clean up your office and you've achieved your goal. But if you don't change the system or the habits that got your office messy in the first place, your office is just going to be messy all over again pretty quickly. So the point was what exactly? Goals also actually keep us from being happy. Everyone believes, oh, once I reach my goal, then I'm going to be happy. But of course, if you don't reach your goal, you're not going to be happy. That makes sense. But you're also unhappy after you hit your goal because now you don't have anything to look forward to. When the Olympian gold medalist comes home, do you think she's going to be happiest getting back to her system of training for the next event? Or is she really going to prefer spending every waking moment on Netflix? And lastly, goals are actually at odds with long-term progress. Many people will train hard to run a marathon, but when the marathon is over, they completely stop running. The goal was running the marathon, not on becoming a runner. So once the marathon, their motivation is gone. So is the healthy progress. On the flip side, a runner, someone who has made exercise a habit that is an important part of his or her life, can train for a marathon, run the marathon, and then go back to a more reasonable running schedule. The runners continue their long-term progress of getting and remaining healthy. The marathoners, by comparison, are no healthier overall. They could actually be less healthy because they may have hurt themselves, and they're more likely to be Netflixing with the washed-up Olympians in the last example. Okay, so if you're anything like me, you can only listen to theory for so long. At some point, you want to interrupt the speaker and say, okay, great. Yes, nice idea you have there, but what do I do with it? So let's talk about what we do with this mindset shift from goals to habits. Well, if we focus on habits, we can work with what the author calls the habit loop. It's a basic human process that's already wired in your head that goes from cue, the thing you notice, to craving, to action, to reward. And the cycle is self-sustaining because the pleasure you receive when you get your reward makes the cue that triggered it, the whole process, even more attractive. So this just keeps spinning along. For example, consider your smartphone. Let's say you're in the middle of a movie theater and you were a polite member of society and switched your phone to vibrate. You've been waiting to see this movie for a while, and it is as good as you hoped it would be. So you're completely into it. You are totally enthralled. And your phone buzzes because you've gotten a text. You might not even notice if the movie really is that good. But if it goes off a few times, you're going to start to notice. Some of us could still ignore the message, and others would be driven mad about not knowing what the message said. But what about the parents that are in the theater with you? What if your toddler is with a new sitter? Or if you have a new driver out with her friends and the phone keeps buzzing? What if you're like my cousin, whose son has been on a submarine for 6 months now, who she hadn't seen for almost a year before that? And he promised to call her the minute he was on dry land. How irresistible do you think that buzzing is now? That buzzing is your cue. Sometimes it's a cue you can ignore completely or for a chunk of time, but sometimes, whether it's a sign of something wonderful or something scary, it is utterly irresistible. Nothing is going to stop your craving, your need to check that message and know what the message is. And nothing's going to stop your action, your reaction, your diving into your pocket to check your phone. And finally, you have your reward. Now you have the knowledge. Now you know. You don't have to have your brain spinning, wondering, what could it be? What could it be? What if it's this? What if it's this? Now you just know. And that relief you feel from just knowing is so impactful that the next time you feel or hear a text come in, you automatically grab your phone without even thinking. You're hooked. Now, what if we can work with this loop, this system that's already hardwired into our brains, and use it to make goal achievement easier? Obviously, in the example of getting addicted to your phone, not a good habit, but an example. If we could use it for goal achievement, there'd be no more of this trying harder or having more willpower. We just have to find and focus on the right cues to kick the process off for each reward you want, and nature will take care of itself. Okay, so enough generalities. How does this all apply to note investing? The reason we're here. Well, excuse me, needed a little drink. You guessed it. We're going to create a habits-driven note business. Working with the habit loop to almost automate motivation so we achieve what we set out to achieve in 2020 and beyond. But again, as we talked about earlier, before we can get started, we have to know where we're going. And that involves two important questions. So, question one, what kind of note business do you want to have? Do you want to invest full-time or part-time? This will give you a better idea of how much time you have to work with on your goals. Next, do you want to be an active investor, being the one that finds the deals and finds the funding and manages all the workouts? Or do you want to be a passive investor that funds deals for active investors? Each comes with important due diligence skills, but obviously managing deals takes more work day to day. What do you want to invest in? Firsts, seconds, contracts for deed? Each asset has a slightly different skill set. And lastly, what type of returns are you looking for? Are you looking for steady monthly cash flow from a performing note? Or a similar return from a slightly cheaper reperforming note? Or do you want lump sum returns like you get from a foreclosure on a non-performing note? Or do you really want to help people and you want to improve your chances of helping people by getting them to start paying and staying in their homes? So you're going to look for a semi-performing note, a borrower that's really trying and you can just give them the little fix so that they are successful. Then you might want semi-performing notes. Each element on this list requires a different action plan to get to resolution. So you got to figure out what it is you want to do. Then our second question, what size note business do you want to have? Obviously, the amount of work necessary to create $1 million business is a lot different than what you need to invest $50,000 in 2020. If you want a larger business, it will require more research, more marketing, more funding, and more deal flow. If you want to invest $50,000 in 2020, your tasks don't change, but the magnitude of your tasks, the amount of time you need to spend on them is going to change. You'll probably find the right spot for your money only a couple of weeks into the year, maybe a couple of months after you start looking. And I emphasize probably because there are no guarantees. Some people start their note journey with a lot of investing or real estate experience, and others are so green that I'm really not sure how they found us. So how long it's going to take you to place that 50,000 will depend on where you are starting from. But on a side note, if your goal is to invest, say, 25,000 in 2020, 50,000 in 2020, that is a very reasonable, doable, important goal. But please don't let that mean that you give yourself license to do nothing for the rest of the year. Travel, spend more time having fun with your family, write a book, maybe take some note classes so you can either work your notes better or maybe move from the passive position to the active position. If you have a job that you plan on keeping, maybe you want to take on a new project so that you can challenge yourself. Just do something. I don't care what it is, but please don't check off your 2020 goal in February and then do nothing for the rest of the year. All right, off my soapbox. Okay, now let's apply the idea of a habit loop to the note investing business. We're going to work with the business that we just thought through in the last two slides, the kind of business we want to do and the size of the business we want to have. And let's say we've gone through that whole process and we've decided that we want in 2020 to acquire and manage $250,000 worth of NPN seconds. At the end of the year, our portfolio of seconds will be $250,000 worth. And I say manage because we're going to be the active person. We're not just funding this pool. We are the active person. Okay, so now to get started, we have to break this into our more manageable chunks, our mini goals. That way we can keep an eye on our progress and we're also not going to get overwhelmed. Now, we could divide it by the number of months and come up with small goals that way, but we've already done that. So this time, let's divide it by total dollar amount. Let's make our smaller goal, which would be the reward in this particular loop, a $25,000 investment. It doesn't matter how many seconds you're going to buy with that $25,000. What it matters is that we will do this 10 times in 2020 to hit our mark. Okay? So not 12 because there's 12 months, but 10 times this number gets us to our total for the year. Follow me? Okay. Now also, remember that we're just talking about closing right here. The example would get way too complicated if we did everything in one loop. And it would take forever if we were going to come up with a deal closing loop and a deal finding loop and an investor finding loop and all of that. Those are valuable loops for the note business, but we're just going to focus on this one right now. Okay, so we have our reward and the satisfaction that we're going to feel every time we make our $25,000 investment in 2020. That satisfaction is going to reinforce the cue that we come up for this, the trigger. But it's when you're thinking it through the first time, it's easier to go backwards. So we're going to go from steps 4 to step 1. We're going to figure out what action would lead to our reward, what craving would make us take that action, and then what cue we would need to kick off those cravings. So what kind or kinds of actions are going to get us to the closings we need for our reward? Well, we're going to have to review assets. We're going to have to make bids on good assets. And then, of course, we're going to have to close on those assets. That's pretty simple. You're not going to invest the money if you don't look at the assets. So what would cause us to crave reviewing assets, to crave actually placing bids and actually wiring money to buy these deals? Can you actually crave these things? Yeah, you can. As odd as it sounds, many note investors practically salivate when we get a new tape. It's like Christmas morning all again. Once you've been doing this for a while, even tapes with asset classes that you're not interested in can be almost irresistible. You probably won't be tempted to like redo your whole business model, but you need to look. Maybe 6 months ago, a friend of mine told me that this new tape that came out had a tractor loan on it. I had never seen a tractor loan before. I could not wait to get into that tape and check out a tractor loan. Did I analyze it like I was going to buy it? No. Did I put a bid on it? No. What am I going to do with the tractor? But I invest in notes. I invest in paper. I love to see how it all works. I had to go check out the tractor loan. I am a dork and I'm damn proud to admit it. All right, so what would be the cue that would kick off the craving? Getting a tape, getting an email with a tape in it. Now, you could just wait until the tape shows up, till you happen to be checking your inbox and there's the tape and you get all excited and kick off your habit loop. Or you might be able to boost the impact of your cue. Anytime you involve more than one of your senses in something, you get a stronger reaction. You magnify everything. So you could add a visual or an audible notification each time you receive an email from one of your sellers. Lots of programs will help you do that. Zapier is coming to mind right now, but there are lots of ways of doing it. But what if you did both? What if the second you got a tape, you got a banner across the screen and heard this loud ding on your computer? You think that's going to get you excited? You think you're going to notice? The more interesting you make your cue, especially in the beginning when you're trying to ingratiate this habit, the easier it's going to be to establish your loop. And the more motivated you'll be to continue to work on your goals. Get the idea? Now, like I said, we're not going to take the time tonight to also create a deal finding habit loop and a funding habit loop and all the other loops that are involved in the note space. But they're important. If you create them, I would love it if you would share them with me. I'd love to talk this through with you because I think it is a great way to work with the human brain versus trying to force it to do something that it's just not built for. All right, we are done. Thank you so much for joining me tonight to discuss goal achievement, not goal setting, in 2020. Even if you don't go ahead and create habit loops of your own that you want to share, if you have any questions for me, feel free to reach me. You can catch me in a variety of spots. Your best shot is my company email, kbf@inspiredcapitalgroup.com. You can also reach me at info@noteinvestingacademy.com, but keep in mind that that's a group inbox, so it might take a minute for your email to get to me. On Facebook, you can always reach me under my name, or you can find me in my Facebook group, Nationwide Note Closers Group. And you can catch me in two spots on Meetup now. The DFW Note Closers Group, which I've started in 2015 and run since then. And now you can find me in the New Jersey Distressed Mortgage Group, the group I recently took over from our friend Mahir Allen. And last but definitely not least, our next meetup will be on January 8th, 2020. So don't miss it. If you are subscribed to organizers' messages on Meetup, you'll get an email about it soon, get all the details. And I guess this is my last sign off for 2019. As odd as that sounds, it's my last sign off for this decade. Wow, that's just mind blowing. I hope you and yours have a wonderful holiday season and a fantastic new year. Be safe and take care.